Hey everybody, this is Hercules Penix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Hercules Penix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to begin our examination of Andromeda, a Canadian black and white comic that lasted for 6 issues between 1977 and 1979. Andromeda was an interesting, almost experiment in comics where each issue they would adapt a classic science fiction story from one of the great science fiction authors. This wasn't the first time anyone tried this. Marvel Comics, a few years before this, had their Unknown Worlds of Science Fiction anthology, black and white magazine, and that did the same thing. Andromeda, though, doesn't just adapt short stories from science fiction, it also has news stories from just comic artists creating their own work. So the first issue here, we have a really nice cover by James Allison. I assume this guy did like sci-fi paperback covers because this is pretty slick. I mean, he should have. He could have probably made a lot of money. And we see that the featured story this issue is James Tiptree's The Man Who Walked Home. We have an inside front cover by Robert McIntyre. This guy's pretty damn good. I think I've only seen this guy in Andromeda. You'd think I would have seen him other places. But then again, with chops like this, I'm sure this guy just made a lot of money in like graphic design and stuff. Advertising or whatever. He probably didn't do many comics. We have the contents page with an editorial from Dean Motter, the editor. We've seen Dean Motter's name many times before. He did that Sacred and the Profane that ran in Epic Illustrated. He's done many things over the years. And we have a little illustration here from Jason Ross. We have a nice pinup from Frank Reyes. Frank Reyes drew a comic for them, their sister publication, Eric Kahn. He also, I've seen this guy in some of the 70's DC Tarzans. He did some fill-in issues and backups. Pretty good. Definitely has that Filipino style. I'm not even sure if he's from the Philippines, but it definitely looks like it. So now we start the James Tiptree adaptation. It's weird, this opening here is very like, I don't know, maybe this is what they call the new wave of science fiction. It's almost like Beatnik. This transgression, terror, and he thrust and lost there. Punched into impossibility, abandoned, never to be known how. The wrong man in the most wrong of all wrong places. So this first page, I was like, what the hell are they talking about? So we see this guy drifting through space. But it looks like he's drifting through more than just, three-dimensional space. It's almost like it's fourth-dimensional space. We see all these planets in sequence. So it's like, traveling through time. Or something. I'm not quite sure. So the adaptation of this comic was by John Allison, the guy who drew the cover and draws the first 14 pages of the story. But I guess he had some commitments and he couldn't finish the finished art. So Tony Mears finished it. And if I remember, I'll point out where Tony Mears takes over. You'll probably be able to tell yourself. John Allison is a little more slick. Tony Mears is a little more, almost has a little cartooniness thrown in. The Man Who Walked Home. So I guess in like 1989, which of course back then, that was the future, there was this explosion at this, I think it's in Utah, this place in Utah, the Bonneville Particle Acceleration Facility. And somehow that leads to a worldwide nuclear war. The explosion, one of our missiles goes off, and the Russians retaliate. It's just a sad, stupid apocalypse. And so, basically the majority of the story, we just see mankind, pulling itself back out from the abyss. And so we see a few years after the cataclysm, there's a crater where that Bonneville particle accelerator was, and no grass will grow there. And these people, they migrate to this area. They're shepherds, and they start, they live there for generations. And in the dead center of this kind of shallow crater, people start seeing this apparition. And as the years go by, they realize it's once every year this apparition shows up. And at first, these kids see it. These little kids, they think it's a monster. A huge flat animal making a dreadful roar. Then it vanishes in a flash and leaves an evil smell. So all it gets these kids is a spanking. I guess the parents don't believe them. But then the next year, it happens to a young woman. She sees the apparition. So they start realizing that this is happening. They put up little totems, I guess, to ward it off. And then, after the 30 years, a tall old man limped down the hills from the south. He camped at the far side of the crater. He attempted to question the locals, but he had a different language. And he basically hung out there 2 years just so he could watch the apparition, the manifestation. And then he then he just left, never to be seen again. So we see decades and years and decades pass. Oh, I'm sorry. Before he left, that old man from the south, he left a little plaque right where the manifestation happened. So these people, these shepherds, get pushed out of the area by a band of grizzled men. I guess they're just kind of like cavemen, barbarian types. And we just see Earth kind of struggling to get back on its feet. Decades pass, centuries pass. A small town grows at the edge of the crater. And every year, this manifestation shows up. And, of course, religions grow up around it. There's many cults that think it's some kind of divine thing. Over the years, kids have tried to hit it with sticks. They've tried to net it and capture it. Of course, it does not work. I kind of like this art. It's just very simple. Gets the job done. And so it almost becomes like a tourist industry thing. People travel from all around, not just the religious cultists, but sightseers, to see the manifestation of this thing. And we're starting to see it. It's obviously a guy in a spacesuit. And over the decades and centuries, he's slowly moving. It's almost like it's a snapshot of him moving in slow motion, kind of tumbling and trying to right himself. It's imperceptible year to year. But because they've been documenting this, they realize that he's slowly moving. I like this little grooviness here, that swoop. So now Tony Mears takes over here. And so now, this is like 5 centuries in. We see this young couple. They're going to visit their uncle, who's kind of like a scientist. And they're going to observe. They're there for the annual, it's a festival now. It's a big deal. A big touristy thing. As you can see, the art's not nearly... This is not as good, to be honest. And then they, I guess the uncle gives his niece and her husband, he says, here, read up about this before tomorrow. This is documents we found. So apparently the brother of the manifestation, the man in the spacesuit, the brother wrote a journal about, right after the cataclysm. He went to go try to find his brother. And that is the man who came out of the hills of the South, who set up that little monument, that little plaque. It turns out that was his brother. The spaceman's name is John Delgado. And so we know about him. Even Earth wasn't totally thrust back into ignorance. There's still people who can read old documents. They found old documents. So they know what's going on with this guy. And apparently, at that particle accelerator in Vaudeville, they were doing time travel experiments. So in John's brother, his brother's name is Carl. In Carl's journal, we see him retelling what we just saw, 10 pages ago. Him going to visit the crater, trying to, wait for his brother to manifest. And he could look through his helmet and clearly see that it was John. So this year they're going to do this like microfilament thing to see if they can get some of the dust off the manifestation. Because whenever the manifestation appears, it kind of kicks up some dust. Estonia is pretty good, though. Just a little inconsistent. Some of the faces look great, and some of the faces look a little off. Look a little eh. So once again, like every year, he manifests. John manifests. Of course, everyone's just like, oh my God, it's a miracle. It's amazing. And we finally find out what's on that plaque that Carl left for his brother. He wrote, "Welcome home, John," thinking that his brother would see it for the little microsecond he manifests. So then there's this other plaque put there, and this has the whole story. And so I guess Major Delgado, John Delgado, was sent into the future some hours before the Holocaust of Day Zero. That's what they call it. All knowledge of how they did it is lost, perhaps forever. It's believed that an accident sent him further than it was intended. And so basically he appears on Earth whenever, whatever the point of our solar system will occupy at a future time, and is tangent to the complex helix which our Earth describes around the sun. To be honest, I really don't get the story. The whole time travel thing. Why he appears every year. So they suspect that the explosion, which caused this whole apocalypse, may have occurred when some elements of the past instance of his course were carried with him into their own prior existence. And so they know that that's what caused the apocalypse. And now we see John. So basically in John's experience, he's just floating through this eternal void. But he can has little glimpses of all the people who see him whenever he manifests. So he does have these glimpses of Earth. And basically near the end it says he was becoming he supposed more probable the wound he had punched in time was healing itself. So somehow he punched a hole in time. That's what caused all this craziness. And then we end with some more, not necessarily beatnik, but very almost poetry. And we just see him tumbling through eternity. So to be honest, all that time travel stuff I really don't get. But I just love that kind of science fiction. It's very much like A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller. It's that whole, seeing a whole civilization struggle to get back on its feet. Many generations, the slow progress achieved by these societies. So I really like the story, except the whole framing device of this man lost in time. I can't wrap my head around it. Then again, I'm not too bright, especially when it comes to science. Next, we have a Dean Motter story, The Escape and Pursuit of Jeanne d'Arc. Or Jeanne d'Arc? And this is obviously someone who's been reading a lot of Mobius. And I'm pretty sure Dean Motter was at the time. This is very just kind of surreal. Kind of neat, though. I kind of like this. Very North by Northwest here. Look at that Mobius business going on. So this woman's fleeing this biplane that's trying to kill her. This is one of my favorite Dean Motter stories. Dean Motter can be really bad sometimes. Excuse me, guys. I'm still pretty sick. I just really wanted to make this video. And then this portly samurai with holding a revolver comes out and threatens her. Looks like he's about to shoot her. And then all of a sudden, this warrior woman, kind of Joan of Arc type, she comes out of nowhere and stabs him in the back. She confronts our ingenue, our heroine. And this is kind of just some bullshit, pretentious poetry type stuff. And they start kissing. And I don't know, it looks like she starts going down on this woman. I'm pretty sure that's what we're supposed to infer. Nice shitty on the rock here. That's obviously he's trying to do some kind of Mobius business. And then all of a sudden, I imagine that biplane kills the Joan of Arc character, riddles her with bullets, and then our heroine is holding her dying body. And then this little kid shows up. And this is such a 70s story. This is like so many stories on heavy metal or Epic Illustrated. And this little kid comes up, he's got a crucifix. And our heroine kisses the crucifix, and all of a sudden the scene transforms. She's now kissing a very much more elaborate crucifix held by some kind of bishop. And she's in chains. Looks like, I guess how Joan of Arc died. I think Joan of Arc was burnt. Chained up and burnt up. And now we see the little kid watching her being burned. So, it's just very, very typical 70s story. Like if you were on pot, you'd be like, whoa, man, that was heavy. This one's called The Day at Yggdrasil. I don't know how to pronounce that. And this is Jason Ross, the guy who drew the illustration for that contents page. And this is obviously after Star Wars has come out. We see a very cantina-like scene here. And this comic I looked at many times to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I think I am missing something because apparently the whole point of this comic is this kind of, I don't know, Mobius-looking teddy bear guy. I only say Mobius because his hat kind of looks like Arzak. He's, he comes into a bar. Everyone kind of stops and looks at him. Walks up to the bartender. So it's pretty nice. We actually see some actual Star Wars characters. There's Darth Vader in the background. And he orders a drink from the bartender. He drinks it. In the background, we can see Cobalt 60. Actually, that's Necron 99, Ralph Bakshi's ripoff of Cobalt 60. Pogo and Dino from the Flintstones. He drinks, has his drink, and then he walks out of the bar, and everyone watches him. So, I don't know am I missing something, or is that literally just, that's what happens in this comic? I don't know. It could be. But it does give this guy an excuse to draw some really well-rendered stuff. I mean, God, look at the lines here. He's putting in the work. He's not like the best artist, but he's definitely on his way. Like, look at that. That's a great face, alien face there. And then we have a one-pager from Don Marshall. And look at this, guys. It's like he's channeling Vaughn Baudet and Jeff Jones at the same time. Just with the panel shapes, the lettering. It's so, and then having the word balloons above the panel. So much of that, that was so much part of their styles. But Don Marshall's really good. He's another guy, I always loved his work. Pretty much only saw it in Andromeda. Maybe he was in some of the Star Reach titles, but I don't think so. He's really great. I have a feeling he's another guy who probably just did advertising and graphic design, made a lot of money, and every now and then would do comics. Because I'm sure this guy could have gotten gigs. He was really, really skillful. This is just a troll. It's called Cerebral Swamp Troll. And it's just this troll kind of doing a soliloquy to the audience. I love these little birds here, though. Here's an ad for that Eric Kahn comic I was talking about. Even though the art isn't by Frank Reyes, it's by this other guy. Pretty nice. And then we have this beautiful back cover by Paul Rivich. And Paul Rivich, you might know from Mr. X. He was another guy who was just very slick. Mostly did album covers. He had his own graphic design firm. But every now and then he'd do comics. And it was nice when he did, because the guy always drew beautiful stuff. Also, obviously, he did science fiction paperback covers too. This looks like one. So this is a coming attraction for next issue. It's really nice work. So there you go, guys. Andromeda #1. So there's going to be 5 more of these over the, I don't know, every 5 episodes or so, every 4 or 5 episodes, we'll be looking at another one. Hope you enjoyed looking at these. These are kind of interesting to me. It just, like, I find it interesting that this was obviously just like a small publisher in Canada. You know, they couldn't even afford color. I think Andromeda had its basis in a chain of comic stores. Just like Dark Horse started as a retail place and then became a publishing house, publishing company. I think Andromeda was the same thing, where they were maybe 1 or 2 comic stores, maybe a small distributor, and they said, we're going to make our own comic. But the quality of creators, it obviously is probably pretty cheap. I don't think they were swimming in money, these guys. And it's not like any of these guys are big names. Most of these guys I've never seen outside of Andromeda, but they're all really high quality. Like, yeah, all of these guys could have drawn for heavy metal if they wanted to, or for Marvel or DC, for anyone. But I never saw them outside of Canada, or at least Andromeda. So, I don't know, kind of interesting. So I'm really looking forward to revisiting these again over the next week or 2 or 3. And I hope you guys like looking at it. And I hope to see you next time here at the Hercules Penics Academy of Comic Book Studies.